Hey everyone, it's Pastor Scott Fielder. Welcome to another edition of Hope Lutheran Church in Hollywood's midweek devotional. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Please make sure to subscribe or like or follow, whatever the platform calls for, so that you can get notified about when this goes live every week, and also our online Sunday service as well. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that this devotion is a blessing to all who see it. Our reading for this week comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 32, verses 22 through 31. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed, and he was limping because of his hip. Here ends the reading. What's in a name? Would a rose by any other name smell any less sweet? Shakespeare sure was onto something, and if we dig deeper into this question, it becomes much more complicated. As individuals, we do not call each other human being. We all have our own name given to us by someone. Sometime after, the struggle of hours of labor, we are named, and therefore we are set apart. This morning we read about a struggle between God and a human, and what's interesting to me is that God gives Jacob this new name when he asks to be blessed. That's not necessarily what I would think would happen if I asked someone to bless me. In that moment, Jacob became blessed and set apart in a new way, because we name things that we care about. Sometimes it's our first car, or we name our stuffed animals, or we give special nicknames to certain things. There are so many reasons that we give things a name, because they're important to us, because we love them, because they're special to us, or they are a blessing to us. And the way we see them is not the way that others do. Maybe they just don't understand how important or how special that is to us. Names are extremely important. My wife and I, a few years ago, when we were the directors of a Lutheran Bible camp at El Camino Pines, we loved the idea that we got to help kids fall in love with nature and helping them to learn how to be a community with all different kinds of people from different places, and giving them a chance to learn about themselves. And we wanted them especially to know that they had been named and claimed by a God who loves them no matter what. And I remember one of the great privileges that we had was running the staff and training program one year. And it's this program where it's an opportunity for 16 and 17-year-olds, high schoolers, to spend 4 weeks learning how to be leaders. And more specifically, we teach them leadership skills that help them to become future counselors at those Bible camps. But not that just there, but also in their own churches and in their communities. And we had an especially large group that year. We had 15 kids from all over Southern California, from Santa Maria all the way down to San Diego. Some of them had been longtime, camp goers and knew the camps very well. And we even had, one who had never been to any sort of Bible camp in his life. All of our kids, they quickly bonded, which you do at camp when you're eating all of your meals together and doing everything together. There is this quick bond that formed, and they loved sort of being a part of this community. And they wanted so much for it to feel like a family that they wanted to start using that kind of language towards my wife and I, and towards each other, whether it was brother, sister, or mom, or dad. And when this started happening, we at first you kind of think it's great, but then you have to really think about what it means when you take on those kinds of names for one another. And we talked about what this meant for us as leaders and for the group as a whole. And we ended up having a very lengthy discussion with our kids about it as well, and how, these sorts of names that are given, these are of great importance. And that being seen, as a parent or a sibling to someone should not be taken lightly. It's something that comes with a lot of responsibilities, because they all came from homes where they have parents and siblings, grandparents, and they play important roles in their lives. And we wanted to remind them that we were going to care for them and love them like parents, but that we could never replace those people, the people who named them. And this is sort of the brighter side of naming, but unfortunately there is sort of this darker side, to names that must be called out. Names do not only help us feel special, but can make us feel extremely small or meaningless or horrible. There are many names that people give to others to make them, feel a certain negative way, especially throughout history. Many of them are so horrific that they should never be repeated. And, unfortunately, I wouldn't even need to speak them, and you could know what I was talking about. And when people take actions like this, it is this travesty, of the privilege of being, able to say that name to somebody and not have it hurt you, but to do so much damage to them. And lastly, naming something, it needs to be noticed, brings it, to light. When an injustice has been done, naming it brings it to the surface, and it can no longer be ignored. It can no longer hide. When unarmed, Black, Indigenous people of color and, and others are being shot, by law enforcement, and all of a sudden there's these names that surface, and there's, these movements like Black Lives Matter, it's at this forefront, of social media at large, and these injustices will no longer be ignored because we continue to call them out and we continue to name what they are, even though they are horrible. God has blessed all of us with a name, and that name is child. God has named us and claimed us as God's own, and that is something that nobody can take from us. In our story, Jacob, doesn't know it yet, but when he's given this name, Israel, he has been given this greater purpose, probably nothing like he could have imagined. And we too have been called in this way, not just to be in and exist in the world, but to live in it with a purpose. When we have a name, we cannot be ignored. And when we know that we are a part of God's family, we know that going out into the world and sharing the good news that all are God's children is a great privilege, whether it's, helping to someone realize their purpose in the world or unearthing a great injustice. All these things are callings and things that God moves us to do. Because with a name, we can be a blessing. So I say to you, go as a named and claimed child of God and do that. Amen.